Hello there, welcome to Planet America's Weekend Edition. I'm John Barron.
And I'm Licciardello.
This week, a look ahead to next week's elections, including the high-profile race to be the next mayor of New York City, which could help determine the future of the Democratic Party itself.
And I'm going to be looking at the candidates who might be standing in the way of all that change, John. Why are so many very, very old politicians refusing to pass the torch? But first,
Election 2025.
Next week, as the calendar turns to November, the leaves turn to brown and the jack-o'-lanterns slowly compost on the front porches of America. Voters will go to the polls in a number of state and local elections that have taken on national significance. These are the so-called off-year elections. And one of the most keenly watched is in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Once solidly Republican, it's become a lot more favourable to Democrats in recent years. Adding to Republican woes, Virginia has a habit of delivering a backlash against the incumbent party in nearby Washington, D.C. The top of the ticket is looking good for Democrats, as former Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger, who's also a former CIA operations officer, looks like taking the governor's race against her Republican rival, winsome Earle-Sears. She's the current Lieutenant Governor, a Marine Corps veteran who emigrated with her parents from Jamaica as a child. The incumbent Republican Governor, Glenn Youngkin, is term limited, so he can't run again, and he does seem to be getting ready for a potential White House bid in 2028. Some polls had Earle-Sears closing to within 5 percentage points in the past week. Others, though, have Spanberger pulling a full 12 points clear. But the average has pretty much stayed where it's been since August. Spanberger leading by 7. Although the race in Virginia that is garnering the most attention, even dominating that governor's race, is the contest for Attorney General, which we've talked about a couple of times on Planet America. Democrat Jay Jones was hit with a texting scandal where he'd once condoned violence against a Republican political rival.
The messages sent to another lawmaker talked about shooting the Republican Speaker of the State House, Todd Gilbert. One of the messages read, 3 people, 2 bullets, Gilbert, Hitler, and Pol Pot. Gilbert gets 2 bullets to the head. Adding, put him with, quote, the 2 worst people you know, and he receives both bullets every time.
Since that October surprise hit, Jay Jones has gone from leading his Republican rival, Jason Miyares, by 6 points to now trailing him by around 3. That scandal caused some very awkward moments for Jones's fellow Democrats, including Spanberger, who wouldn't call him out, wouldn't call on him to resign, but wouldn't defend him either.
yeah, Spanberger was happy to condemn Jones's words, but I don't think she was prepared to completely throw him under the bus because she was still comfortably ahead in her race. There's no pressure on her. She didn't have to throw him overboard. And he still seemed to have a chance of actually winning at the time. So she kind of left him alone. And that led to some incredibly awkward moments, John, like this from the governor's debate.
I'm wondering why my opponent won't say beyond its abhorrent and disgusting, why she won't say it is not okay and that he must leave the race because Jay Jones advocated the murder, Abigail, the murder of a man, a former speaker, as well as his children who were 2 and 5 years old. You have little girls. What would it take him pulling the trigger? Is that what would do it? And then you would say he needs to get out of the race? Abigail, you have nothing to say? Abigail.
Cringe. Amazingly, though, Jay Jones had other electoral liabilities as well. Back in 2022, Jones was convicted of reckless driving for driving 116 miles per hour in a 70 mile per hour zone. When the local news station dug through their archives, they found when someone else was convicted of driving 115 miles per hour in the 70 zone in the same county, they got 10 days in jail, their licence was suspended for 6 months, and they were fined $2,000. Then, once they got their licence back, they were only allowed to drive to and from work. But in Jay Jones's case, he got no jail time, just a $1,500 fine. His driving privileges weren't affected at all, not even for 1 day, and he got 1,000 hours of community service. And if that wasn't suspicious enough as a sweetheart deal, let's talk about those 1,000 hours of community service. Because you see, he actually split them up into 2. two lots of 500. One was with a political action committee called Meet Our Moment, which happened to be his political action committee.
How convenient.
And he was campaigning at the time.
Yeah.
Coincidentally enough. The other 500 hours was for the NAACP, a legitimate organisation, the Virginia State Conference of the NAACP. But his law firm was representing them in a court case at the time, so he might have just been working.
Yeah.
We don't know, we can't verify any of the time he spent supposedly in community service.
Yeah, he wasn't picking up trash on the highway that he drove down at 116 miles an hour. That's 186 kilometres an hour.
There you go.
That's quick.
They're literally trying to get a special counsel for him right now to look at all this garbage. He's not a strong candidate, John, and yet he's only, 3 or 4 points behind. That tells you just how on the nose Republicans are in Virginia at the moment, which I suppose isn't a surprise given Trump and Russell Vought have been trying to sack them all. They're all federal workers.
A lot of federal workers in Virginia. And look, Democrats were sort of in a bit of a bind here because this happened in early October. It was within the 60-day period by which it is too late to change the name on the ballot. So Jay Jones could have quit the race, but then Democrats would have had to basically put up flyers in polling stations saying our preferred write-in candidate, for you to just add a name in a space there, is whoever. And it's very hard to win as a write-in candidate under those. So they basically thought, look, we may or may not lose this race, but we'll definitely lose if we have to take his name off the ballot. So look, they tried to stand by him. We had the likes of Tim Kaine kind of saying, hey, that was years ago. He's matured so much since then. It's a shame for Democrats because they had high hopes that Jay Jones was actually going to be going on to be maybe governor someday. But he's going to be lucky to be Attorney General, and serious questions as to whether he should be the chief law officer of Virginia after those kinds of comments.
Oh, yeah, John.
Yeah. The other race we're watching this week as well is up in New Jersey, another governor's contest. The Democrat there is Mikey Sherrill. She's a congresswoman, a former Navy pilot, and her rival is the Trump-backed former Republican state representative and businessman Jack Ciattarelli. Now, this is even closer than things are in Virginia, and it seems that this has loomed very much as a referendum on President Trump.
Her entire campaign is based on a stack of lies about me, her disdain for the president, and she can fly a helicopter, none of which is going to fix New Jersey.
He said it's his job to support the president of the United States. I think as governor, it's the job to support the people of New Jersey.
Now, Mikey Sherrill is seen as a little bit like Abigail Spanberger. Some people would like them to be seen as the future of the Democratic Party, more moderate Biden wing candidates. Mikey Sherrill's lead in the polls is currently 4 percentage points, but that has slipped from 9 points in September. 2 polls this week had Ciattarelli within 1 percentage point. So Republicans, Chaz, are hoping that they could be on to an upset in New Jersey.
Yeah, the Republican Ciattarelli tried to turn this race into a, similar to Virginia really, the Attorney General's race. He tried to turn Sherrill into Jay Jones.
Yeah.
There have been a lot of minor controversies and scandals involving her. Someone got their hands on Sherrill's private military records, for example. They found that both she and her husband had been mixed up in a cheating scandal in military college, and Sherrill wasn't even allowed to attend her own graduation. Ciattarelli also accused her of illegally profiting from her trading of stocks while she was in Congress.
As a member of Congress, Mikey Sherrill made millions in the stock market.
You made millions on the stock market, tripling your net worth while you were in Congress and you were fined for unreported trades. What do you say to that?
Trading hundreds of stocks,
We don't trade individual stocks.
tripling her net worth.
I think we made money.
And while Sherrill got filthy rich, she didn't play by the rules.
It's not as if I go sit on the House Armed Service Committee and suddenly I'm trading Boeing.
Mikey Sherrill, rich on stocks, broke on FX.
There's been plenty of mud. Not all of it's been sticking, I don't think.
It's been a bit swift-boaty, some of it.
Yeah, but I don't think it's really hurt her the same way. It's not a Jay Jones scenario, let's put it that way. But then Sherrill accused Ciattarelli's old publishing company of publishing medical education books that downplayed the dangers of opioids, and that led to this, well, extraordinary exchange in the governor's debate.
I think our kids deserve better. I think the people you got addicted and died deserve better than you. And I'll tell you, tens of thousands here as you published misinformation, as you got more people addicted, as you got paid to develop an app so that more people could get more opioids and die.
I got to walk at my college graduation.
I got to walk at my college graduation.
And I'm so glad that you then went on to kill tens of thousands of people in New Jersey, including children,
and I never broke the law.
You just broke the law. In fact, your campaign right now is under federal investigation for how you illegally got access to my records. So to say that right now, and I think you're trying to divert from the fact that you killed tens of thousands of people by printing your misinformation, your propaganda, and then getting paid to develop an app so that people could more easily get the opioids once they were addicted.
Killing tens of thousands of people seems a bit over the top, John.
Yeah, quite a stretch.
So
his publishing company published the medical journal. Look, there might be some liability there, but it's never been proven in court, you know.
Yeah, I think it's a big stretch. And look, all I'd say is, if she's that desperate that she's going there, you killed thousands of people, it might be a closer race than we realise.
Yeah, and Licciardello has run a few campaigns before this. He has got Trump's very, very solid backing. He is a very Trumpy kind of a figure. He's also a very New Jersey kind of figure. He's not dissimilar in some ways to Chris Christie, the Republican who was governor of New Jersey as well. So he's in with a really solid chance. And there are some states that, some of these purple states like Virginia, that seem to be turned off Republicans in the Trump era. New Jersey is not one of them. They get Trump in a way that some other Democrat-leaning states have not. Now, there's also a race to be the next mayor of America's largest city, New York City. It's home to 8.5 million people, the biggest city in America, but about 7 million of them either won't or can't vote. Leading in the polls of those who do intend to vote is the Democratic Socialist Zoran Mamdani. He's a 34-year-old state assemblyman who has the backing of Senator Bernie Sanders and Progressive Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And belatedly, he also has the endorsement of the Democrats' House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, who's from New York. Mamdani's Muslim faith, as well as his far-left policies like free buses, expanding free childcare, city-run grocery stores and higher taxes on the rich to pay for it, have drawn plenty of criticism from moderate Democrats as well as Republicans. But he is leading in the polls by 15 percentage points in the average of polls, although two polls in the last week have put the gap at more like 10 points.
I stand before you tonight as the nominee of a Democratic Party reinvigorated in its pursuit of making government work for everyone, not just the wealthy and the well-connected.
Zoran Mamdani's very well-connected main rival is Andrew Cuomo. He's the former Democratic New York State governor. You might recall was forced to resign back in 2021 after an inquiry found he'd sexually harassed multiple women. He's now running as an independent after losing the Democratic primary to Mamdani this year.
He's not a Democrat. He's a socialist who happens to be on the Democratic line. I'm a Democrat who happens to be on the independent line. But they make a mistake if they believe he is a Democrat.
Despite running as an independent, Andrew Cuomo has the backing of prominent Democrats like the former president, Bill Clinton. Cuomo served as his HUD secretary back in the 90s. And former Republican turned independent mayor, now mostly Democratic billionaire Michael Bloomberg, who's pumped almost $10 million into the Cuomo campaign. And then, of course, there is Curtis Sliwa, the Republican candidate and founder of the vigilante group, the Guardian Angels, whose red berets were a familiar sight on the New York subway system in the 1980s and 90s. He even tried to set up some Guardian Angels chapters here in Australia about 30 years ago. Curtis Sliwa has been running a distant third in the polls. Some accuse him of splitting the anti-Mamdani vote, hurting Cuomo's chances, but Sliwa has defended staying in the contest this way.
I don't know how many times I have to say it. I'm the only Republican candidate. I'm the law and order candidate. Andrew Cuomo, the architect of no cash bail that's caused the crime crisis. Zoran Mamdani, his apprentice, raised the age, closed the prison. They're both in agreement. They're like two peas in a pod. I give people an alternative choice in this election.
The other major figure in this election, Chaz, is not actually running. This is the incumbent Mayor Eric Adams. He dropped out of the Democratic primary after a series of corruption scandals hit him. He was charged with bribery and fraud before Trump basically ordered the Justice Department to drop those charges. Adams also ran as an independent before a lack of money and support in the polls ended his campaign a few weeks ago. Adams now supports Cuomo, making attacks on Mamdani like this.
Am I angry that I'm not the one taking down Zoran, the socialist and the communist? You're darn right I am. But you know what? The city means more to me than anything.
As well as the name-calling about communists, the campaign has been pretty ugly at times. This social media post from former Trump staffer Earle-Sears is typical of what's been floating around. Pictures of the Twin Towers on 9/11 and a person falling to their death. With the words, "Never forget, early voting begins today. Vote Andrew Cuomo and save our city." By the way, reports suggest that President Trump offered Eric Adams inducements to end his campaign to potentially get Cuomo over the line. Reports suggesting an ill-fated deal to make Mayor Eric Adams the Trump administration's ambassador to Saudi Arabia. President Trump, who of course is a former New Yorker, has been taking a keen interest in this contest too, and he clearly relishes the opportunity to be able to potentially brand all Democrats now as socialists.
The more people learn about Mamdani, the less they like him.
Well, we'll see about that, but for now it seems that more than enough New Yorkers like Mamdani enough to make him their next mayor, Chaz.
Yeah, look, people have been talking a lot about the socialist thing. I think the Democrats are scared stiff of being tarred nationally as the socialist party because of Mamdani if he becomes...
Bernie Sanders all over again.
Absolutely. Well, I think they're even more worried about Mamdani. Chuck Schumer, he's a New York politician. He hasn't endorsed him.
Yep.
He won't even talk about Mamdani. He doesn't want. The name doesn't come in his lips.
Yeah.
You mentioned Hakeem Jeffries has endorsed him, the speaker, also from New York. He waited till the very last week to endorse Mamdani. That's how much he didn't want to do it. And even on the morning that he endorsed Mamdani, the very morning he endorsed him, he still did not seem very keen to do so.
You're easing into, so that's what Mamdani, A equals B equals C. That's what he stands for. Therefore, you're endorsing Mamdani. Is that? Have I got that?
No, that's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. But what I will say is that I do think that he took an important step in indicating he plans to retain Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch, who's doing a great job.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. But look how frightened he was. That shows you the fear of establishment Democrats. But you know, the truth is, Mamdani has spent the entire campaign laser focused on not so much socialism, but affordability. He's actually been, in my view, a role model to Democrats in how you campaign effectively. He's a very good speaker. He's very charismatic. He's got great videos, and they're all about affordability.
Yeah.
Over and over again, he's been a message machine until this week. And then the final week of the campaign, something very strange happened, John. He decided to make a sharp turn, and he made his closing message in the final week about being a Muslim in New York City.
Since I announced my candidacy for mayor 1 year ago yesterday, I've sought to be the candidate fighting for everyday New Yorkers, not simply the Muslim candidate. I've carried these indignities with me each moment of this race, doing so all the while as the first major Muslim candidate for mayor in New York City history. I thought that if I could build a campaign of universality, I could define myself as the leader I aspire to be, one representing every New Yorker, no matter their skin color or religion. I thought if I worked hard enough, it would allow me to be that leader. And I thought that if I behaved well enough or bit my tongue enough in the face of racist, baseless attacks while returning back to my central message, it would allow me to be more than just my faith. I was wrong. No amount of redirection is ever enough.
Now, that video goes for over 6 minutes. If you're interested, I recommend you watch it. It is confronting and surprisingly negative for the final week of the campaign. I don't know if this was always the plan. I don't know if he's just had enough. He's just sick of the slurs. There's been a lot of 9/11 in the last week or two, John. A lot.
Yes.
I don't know if that's got to him. I don't know if he thinks, oh, I'm so far ahead now, I can't lose, so I might as well just go for it. I don't know what's in his head.
No.
But it is noteworthy how unorthodox this is, to just go, you know, I am just sick to death of you guys going on about me being a Muslim. Stop it.
Yes.
As his final message. What do you make of this?
Yeah. Look, I mean, he struck me as probably acting more out of frustration and anger than this being something that's been planned for many, many months. I think from what he said there, he'd been hoping to avoid having to make a comment or an address such as this. It's drawn some comparisons to the famous Reverend Wright speech on race that Barack Obama gave in 2008 when he was getting attacked for what his former pastor had said about 9/11, about it being America's chickens coming home to roost, a firebrand preacher in Chicago that the Obamas had known for many years, who married them, as I recall. But this was not as elegantly crafted as Obama's race speech. In that speech, Obama talked about the fact that his own beloved grandmother, who was a white woman, had shown racism by getting tense when she saw a black man coming on the street. She was a bank employee. So he empathised with people who felt racism. Mamdani was not doing that. Oh, no. He was just fed up with the trash, and there's been an awful lot of very Islamophobic trash. Whether it is that he feels as though he's so far in front, he can't afford to, but he didn't sound like somebody who's winning there. He sounded like somebody after they've lost, kind of going, this sucks. So yes, it was a pretty remarkable speech, and I'm not sure what effect it's going to have. But for more on this historic vote for Mayor of the Big Apple, I spoke to Politico's New York City reporter, Jeff Coltin. Jeff Coltin, welcome to Planet America's Weekend Edition. So some of the polls this week have shown Andrew Cuomo closing the gap a bit with Zoran Mamdani. What's going on, do you think?
Well, Cuomo is really making the case that there are only two candidates in this race, Zoran Mamdani and Andrew Cuomo. In reality, there are another 5 candidates on the ballot, including Republican Curtis Sliwa. But Cuomo is making the case that a vote for Sliwa is a vote for Mamdani. It's just wasting your vote. The only way to defeat this Democratic Socialist candidate is by voting for Cuomo. And I think that some people are listening. We've seen a lot of movement towards Cuomo when it comes to big institutional Republican leaders. They're supporting him, but he still has a long way to go. We're talking a double-digit gap still with Zoran Mamdani.
Jeff, the Republican candidate Curtis Sliwa has been under quite a lot of pressure to drop out of the race, being accused of splitting the anti-Mamdani vote and potentially dooming Cuomo to defeat. Why do you think he has determinedly stayed in this race with only maybe 10 or 15% support?
Pride is a part of it. This would look really bad for himself personally, and it would also look bad for the Republican Party if the party just gave up and supported Andrew Cuomo, who has been a Democrat for 67 years. So that's part of it. There's down ballot races that he doesn't want to hurt. Sliwa has made the case that if he stays on the ballot, then that can help, city council members or district attorney candidates, the other races. And more than anything, I think it's that Curtis Sliwa doesn't like Andrew Cuomo. He doesn't want to help Cuomo. He doesn't want to help him become the mayor. I think in his heart, Sliwa probably is less worried about a Mamdani mayoralty than a lot of other people are. And I think he has come to terms and accepted that Mamdani is probably going to be the mayor.
Jeff, is it conspiracy thinking to suspect that maybe Republicans really do want Zoran Mamdani to win this election, so next year they can turn around and say, hey, look, all Democrats are socialists?
No conspiracy. They're outright saying it. Donald Trump himself has said that he wants a Mamdani for that reason. Many other Republican leaders are saying the same thing. In fact, we are already seeing Republicans tying Mamdani to Democrats in other races outside of New York City, in Long Island, in the suburbs, and Westchester County, kind of the areas around New York. It's becoming Mamdani's Democratic Party, according to the Republicans. So yes, I think they are hopeful that that having a Democratic Socialist mayor of New York could be a negative thing for Democrats, and it could hurt Democrats when it comes to swing seats in 2026. Time will tell, of course. A lot of Democrats are saying it's quite the opposite, that Mamdani is invigorating the party, that he's talking about affordability, and that the National Party needs to follow him, and that he will actually help the party nationally.
So what would you say, Jeff, is the bigger issue right now, the fact that Mamdani is a Democratic Socialist or that he is a Muslim man running to be mayor of New York City?
Both are big factors. He's faced Islamophobia in this race. He would be the first Muslim mayor. Democratic socialist. I mean, sure, there's a lot of New Yorkers who simply do not agree with his politics and will never support his politics. I think the biggest thing for him to overcome, though, has actually been his age. 34 years old. He would be the youngest mayor of New York in 100 years. He has limited experience in government. He was a state assembly member for 5 years. And I think a lot of people question that, whether he can lead this. I mean, mayor of New York City is often considered the second hardest job in politics, in American politics at least, behind President of the United States. There's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of power, and every single news camera and news media, they're all here in New York looking at the mayor. So it's a tough job, and I think his age has been something to overcome. So far, he's managed it.
If Mamdani does win this election, it will be an extraordinary rise for a 34-year-old state assemblyman. How do you account for his popularity? Is it the progressive nature of his policies? Does it come down to something as simple as, well, he has a very nice smile and personality? What's his appeal?
It's a little bit of everything. I mean, he has been an incredible communicator, very good videos, very good social media, very good at speeches. I mean, he just has charisma, and that goes a long way. Better than that, he has a good message. He was hammering on affordability. He has a lot of more controversial views. He's previously supported defunding the police. He's supported legalizing or decriminalizing prostitution. He is pushing that all to the side, and he is only focusing on affordability. That has also helped him. And then on top of that, he has weak opponents. Governor Andrew Cuomo, his main opponent in this race and his main opponent in the primary, he resigned 4 years ago in a sexual harassment scandal. If Mamdani were running against maybe other less scandalized Democrats, I don't know if he would have pulled this off. But it was a perfect storm, all of this together.
And what has this race revealed about the divisions within the Democratic Party nationally, Jeff? The fact that we've still got some old school Democrats like Bill Clinton supporting Andrew Cuomo, even though he's not the Democratic nominee. And then, of course, AOC, Bernie Sanders, and some others who are supporting Zoran Mamdani.
It is a huge divide. I mean, I mentioned that Mamdani has been winning over mainstream Democrats. That's because there was a big divide. He hasn't won them all over. There's still a lot of people that don't want to see the Democratic Party going in this lefter direction. They don't want a Bernie Sanders Democratic Party. They want a Joe Biden Democratic Party. And so Mamdani has just caused this explosion. And yeah, it's a New York City race, but it's reverberating across the entire country. And a lot of Democrats are trying to decide, what is the future for our party? How are Democrats going to follow Donald Trump? Is it going to be with a democratic socialist bent like Mamdani, a little more populist in the Democratic Party? Or is it going to be the more traditional way of winning, that Bill Clinton, Joe Biden way of doing things?
Jeff Coltin, thank you very much for joining us on Planet America's Weekend Edition.
Thanks for having me. Absolutely.
One of the other elections to watch out for next week is in California, where they're voting in a special election on Proposition 50. This is Governor Gavin Newsom's attempt to give the state's overwhelmingly Democratic lawmakers the power to redraw the state's electoral boundaries. But that'll help Democrats regain some of the seats that they're about to lose as a result of the partisan Republican gerrymander down in Texas.
Prop 50 would give lawmakers a one-time power to adjust districts now instead of waiting until after the next census in 2030. Local supporters say the goal is to add 5 more Democratic seats in the House next year amid an already contentious midterm battle for power on Capitol Hill.
And the yes and no cases have been drawing on some star power, with actor and former California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger returning to the political fray to argue against this proposition.
When they say this is temporary, there is no such thing. I mean, the longest programs are government programs that are temporary. Okay, just remember that if it is a tax program or if it is the redistricting program, Anything that is temporary with government is permanent.
Actually, not even close to being true, but it's a nice political talking point, I guess. Helping Gavin Newsom to argue the yes case is another blast from the past.
California, the whole nation is counting on you.
Former President Barack Obama has entered the Prop 50 chat.
Democracy is on the ballot November 4th. Republicans want to steal enough seats in Congress to rig the next election and wield unchecked power for 2 more years.
So the stakes in this contest are very high, not just for the Democrats hoping to win the House of Representatives a year from now, but for Governor Newsom himself. He's currently the Democrats' top pick for president in 2028. If he's gambled on Prop 50 and loses, his hopes of winning the White House are badly damaged. But it is looking good for both Prop 50 and Newsom in the polls right now. The yes vote is leading by about 13 percentage points. That in a poll this week from the Public Policy Institute of California, Chaz.
Yeah, Schwarzenegger is an imposing opponent to come up against. He's clearly a principled guy, and in fact, he seems to be the only person involved in this issue who is not obviously acting out of pure cynicism. He's consistently supported independent redistricting for decades.
Yes, yeah.
But despite his best efforts, it seems to me Conservatives have pretty much given up this contest. According to Ad Impact, from October 12 to this week, Republicans supporting the no vote had spent a whopping, wait for this, $341,000 on advertising. Compared to the Democrats' yes campaign spending only a measly $26 million. And for the last week of the campaign, the no campaign has reserved $9,000 of advertising compared to the yes campaign's $10 million. I just want to know what ads they booked that only cost $9,000. Was it the graffiti in public bathroom walls?
Yes, exactly. Small writing in that graffiti as well, $9,000.
So that's 5 seats to the Democrats, essentially, 4 to 5, depending on how they draw the boundaries. I should just say, just very quickly, look out for Virginia. We haven't talked about this until now. They've found a weird loophole. I'll talk about it some other time. We're running out of time now. But I think they're going to get 3 more seats to the Democrats there as well.
Very interesting.
In the end, after all this messing around with redistricting, it might end up even.
That would be ironic. Now, speaking of electoral matters this week, given President Trump's preparedness to disregard the law, conventions, the Constitution, comments like this one from his former advisor, Steve Bannon, do start to sound a lot more serious.
Well, he's going to get a 3rd term. So Trump 28, Trump is going to be president in 28, and people just ought to get accommodated with that.
So what about the 22nd Amendment?
There's many different alternatives. At the appropriate time, we'll lay out what the plan is. But there's a plan, and President Trump will be the president in 28.
Yeah, by which he presumably means the plan is for Trump to be re-elected again in 2028 with a new term starting in 2029. Because if he's still alive, not impeached and removed from office, Trump will be president in 2028 either way. That is the end of his 2nd term.
Good point.
Steve Bannon does not seem there to be joking. If he is, he's incredibly deadpan, and his comments did garner a lot of attention.
Could President Trump be elected to a 3rd term?
I'm deeply concerned about it. And guys like Bannon, they're not screwing around.
This is some of the stupidest talk I've ever heard.
Stupid or not, Trump himself keeps handing out those Trump 2028 baseball caps, and he has not ruled out running again, although he does concede he knows he's not meant to.
I have my highest poll numbers that I've ever had. And, you know, based on what I read, I guess I'm not allowed to run. So we'll see what happens.
He's wrong about the polls, of course. Trump averages 43% approval, according to Nate Silver. He slipped to 39% in a YouGov poll this week, and maybe that's why this week Trump was also basically anointing potential successors.
We have JD, obviously. The vice president is great. I think Marco's great. I think, I'm not sure if anybody would run against us. I think if they ever formed a group, it would be unstoppable.
OK, so it seems like the door is closed, although Trump supporting Senator Tommy Tuberville says a 3rd term in defiance of the Constitution, while very unlikely, he continued to say, but don't ever close the book on President Trump. Speaker Mike Johnson also revealed this week that he has talked to the president about what he described as the constrictions of the Constitution, and that it takes about 10 years to do anything about that, adding, I don't see the path for that. OK, again, possibly reassuring, but On the one hand, this week we learned that the President and the Speaker of the House have talked about the possibility of him running for a third term in 2028. Steve Bannon says they have a plan, it's going to happen, while Trump is not completely ruling it out. He's going, oh, the polls, the polls. But can anybody actually believe he's going to try? Even after everything we've seen in the last decade, could Trump really be thinking about running for a third term?
As far as I'm concerned, we played a clip of him saying no just then. He said no. I mean, look, I know it wasn't emphatic. He's never going to be super emphatic because he doesn't want to look like a lame duck.
Yeah.
He's old. He doesn't want to look useless.
And he'd be obviously even older in 2028. He'd be 82 and a half, going on 83 at the time of the next swearing in.
I think that's as strong a denial as you're ever going to get from him. And it's not just that. He's also denied the method by which people are saying that he's... Now, I should say, I don't think there's any way he can become president. I just don't think it's possible. But legally, I don't think Supreme Court will go for it either. But when people say he can do it, they always say, oh, the way he'll do it is by being J.D. Vance's vice president and then basically playing J.D. Vance like a puppet, like Putin did with Medvedev. Yeah, like that's what they say. He's just flat out denied that as emphatically as you possibly could.
Theory on how you might try to serve a third term is that you could run as the vice president.
Yeah, I'd be allowed to do that.
Is it the White House's or the White House counsel's or his legal position, I guess?
You'd be allowed to do that, but I wouldn't do that. I think it's too cute. Yeah, I would rule that out because it's too cute. I think the people wouldn't like that. It's too cute. It's not. It wouldn't be right.
That's a no.
Wouldn't be right.
No, that's a no. I just cannot see this happening. He's saying no. And like you said, that's 3 years away. He's already seems
But yet
old.
the people are demanding it, Chaz.
He's always going to say that.
Yeah, of course.
But the bottom line is, if you don't trust me on this, and I can understand why you don't, because, hey, I didn't think January 6th was going to happen.
Yeah. I didn't think 2016 was going to happen.
There you go. That's fine. If you say, well, you never know with Trump, fine. What's going to control it is not us speculating. It's not going to be people's notions of the law.
Yep.
It's going to be the polls, okay? It's going to be, does anyone want him to run? If he loses the midterms, why are the midterms? If he loses the midterms, the next 2 years after that are just going to be constant investigations. There'll be no budgets passing. There'll be shutdowns all the way. It's going to be a mess. He's already got decades worth of stuff to investigate. Yeah. He'll be impeached. It'll be a disaster.
He'll want President J.D. Vance to keep him out of jail till he dies.
Exactly. He will not want to run after that 2 years. But let's just say he does. Let's look at the polls right now. You mentioned one of them. Have a look at the YouGov Economist tracker poll at the moment. It's terrible. Have a look at this. He's minus 18. That's worse than he was during his first term. And his economic approval, even worse again. Have a look at this. Minus 22, and it's heading further down extremely rapidly. At this point in time, in his first term, he was in the positive. And look at that line. It's awful.
It's not good.
And the economy, the signs are not suggesting it's going to improve. So that is absolutely appalling, given right now the economy is looking like it's getting worse. The unemployment figures, not good. Inflation, not good. This is not going to improve, John. I can't see him being in a situation where he even wants to run again. So I'm putting a line through it. I know no one's going to listen to me. But speaking about politicians who don't know when their time is up, 85-year-old Nancy Pelosi will be facing a serious primary challenge if she decides to run for re-election. At the same time, 88-year-old Washington, D.C. House Rep Eleanor Holmes Norton was the victim of a crime this week, and the police report described her as having the early stages of dementia and having a caretaker with the power of attorney. She denies this, by the way. Also, while we're at it, the Democrats are gradually moving towards 3 critical Senate contests next year, where their candidates could be Janet Mills in Maine at the age of 77, Roy Cooper in North Carolina at the age of 68, and Sherrod Brown in Ohio at the age of 72. Whoa, those are some exciting fresh faces. And I don't need to tell you about the presidential options that we had at our disposal in early 2024. But the ageing doesn't end there. The median age of the House of Representatives right now has risen to 57. The median age of the Senate is up to 65. And you can see that they've both been steadily rising since the early 1980s. In fact, The whole of America is getting older, if you look at that line, but not as old as Congress is. But look, the whole world is aging. Even John and I are aging.
Speak for yourself, dude.
Still, political scientist Lee Drutman has been considering the age of politicians around the world, and he found that if you graph every country in the OECD by the percentage of their politicians over 60, that's that thicket of confusing blue lines there, every single one of them has way fewer over 60-year-old politicians than America does. That's the red line there. In fact, more than 40% of America's politicians are over 60, twice as many as any other country. So this seems to be just an American thing. Why are American politicians so old in particular? There are a few theories out there, but it really comes down to one obvious fact. To keep politicians younger, you need to replace the old politicians. And there are only two ways you can replace them in America. One, through primaries. And incumbents have a huge advantage over primary challengers because of name recognition, party support, and networks through which you can raise cash. That's why only a handful of incumbents lose their primaries each cycle. The other way is through a general election. But since Americans have become more polarised, they've also become more loyal to their parties, which means fewer voters split their tickets and they're open to voting for the other party. And this makes congressional seats safer. Widespread partisan gerrymandering has also made competitive contests even rarer still. So if politicians aren't going to be replaced, then they're going to age in office. That's how living works. And this will filter through to all political positions. At least that's the theory. To find out more, I spoke to that political scientist that I referred to before, Lee Drutman. Lee Drutman, welcome to Planet America. Now, why does the US have so much higher a proportion of old politicians than the other OECD countries do?
Well, there are a few reasons for that. One is because we have only two parties, and so that kind of limits the opportunities for candidates to work their way up. And we have single-member districts, which a lot of candidates tend to hold as incumbents for a very long time because most of these districts are not competitive. So once you win the seat, you're the incumbent, and there are very few challenges. And we also have the most open primary system in the world, in which candidate nominations rely entirely on the voters. And so name recognition of incumbency and also having money, which you can raise when you're an incumbent, really contributes to people staying in office until old age, and also means that even the people who are entering office for the first time tend to be somewhat older because they've waited their turn often, or again, they need to be able to raise the money because of the relatively open primary system. And the older you are, probably the more you are in networks of people who can give you money.
Now, Lee, looking at the data, politicians started to age noticeably in the 1980s. Is there a reason for that?
I'm not sure the reason exactly, but I think that is when you do start to see the increasing number of really safe congressional districts and Senate seats, so that there are more districts where once you're the incumbent, you're kind of the incumbent for life. That is a large part of why we have such old politicians, is because we have such little competition in our politics.
Could this just be reflecting the ageing of the general population? Because again, from looking at the data, it seems like Congress and the Senate have added about 10 years to their median age at the same time as the general population has added about 10 years to its median age.
Yeah, it could be, but it seems somewhat unique to the U.S. And I mean, there are a lot of other democracies in the world, including yours, and we don't see the same accelerated aging of politicians. There seems to be a bit more generational turnover in every other rich democracy. So something is going on here in the U.S. that is distinct.
Okay, so right now there are three very competitive Senate contests coming up in 2026. The Democrats could possibly be running three golden oldies as their candidates for those seats. How does that happen? Is it just about name recognition?
Well, yeah, I think a lot of it is about name recognition. A lot of it is, given. I mean, that this may actually hint at another reason that our politicians are so old is that there are so few elections that are competitive, and these few competitive elections seem to matter so much that the parties tend to the extent that they can control the process, they tend to prefer people who have a track record, who have name recognition, who they know. They're not willing to take a chance on somebody new. And also the parties just don't do a good job of bringing up a new generation. It's sort of only people who have, by their own independence and ambition and some extent luck, have managed to rise up, are in a position to really consolidate those nominations when they open up.
So what are the consequences of the gerontocracy? I mean, they're wise, aren't they? Why should we care? What's wrong with having lots of old politicians?
I mean, old people have plenty of wisdom, but I think we know from a fair amount of science that as you get into your 70s, you start to slow down, and there's a little bit of cognitive decline. And also there's competence and energy issue, but I think there's also a question of generational representation, that younger politicians tend to better be attuned to the concerns of younger voters. They probably are more concerned about the future and have a longer time horizon. So take an issue like climate change. I think younger politicians will care a lot more about that. I happen to think it's a pretty important issue as well. So there's a question of what issues are being raised, what is the knowledge and the experience that different people are bringing. The idea of a representative democracy is that it's representative. That's across multiple dimensions, and I think age is a tremendously important dimension of representation.
Okay, turning to solutions now. Isn't the simplest response to all this just age limits?
Yeah, you could do age limits. I think it would probably make sense to have age limits. There's some question of whether you can do that constitutionally, but I think we ought to have a conversation whether there is an appropriate retirement age for public elected office. I think maybe Americans could get behind the patriotic mandatory retirement age of 76, our Declaration of Independence year, 1776. By the way, all the founders, or most of them, were pretty young when they wrote the Constitution, and even younger when they signed the Declaration of Independence. So
then are age limits your number one solution for the problem, or do you have other suggestions?
Well, age limits would be fine. I mean, more broadly, I think we ought to change how we do voting in the U.S. I think we ought to move to a system of proportional representation, and I think that would create space for some more younger folks to get into politics. In fact, a number of scholars have looked across countries, and they find that there's a pretty robust relationship between the average age of elected politicians and the voting system, and that proportional systems do tend to have younger politicians. And this makes sense because if youth issues aren't being represented, you can start a party and represent younger voters, and there's more competition, there's more dynamism, there's more turnover, and these also tend to be systems in which parties have lists, and parties actually do a pretty good job when they have the power to create turnover within their membership. And ultimately, Joe Biden was forced out by his own party. But in a lot of these places, there's just no real political party. Like the Iowa Republican Party is not really a strong enough party to tell Chuck Grassley that it's time to retire. Right? Chuck Grassley has his own political organization in Iowa that's much more powerful than the Iowa Republican Party.
Lee Drutman, thanks for your time, and good luck turning America into Australia.
All right. Well, here's hoping.
And that is all for another weekend edition of Planet America. Do join us again on Monday night on ABC TV at 9:35 p.m.
And we'll be back here at the same time next week on ABC News, either YouTube and Facebook. And don't forget the PEP podcast, Planet Extra podcast, and all the usual pod places. See you there. Bye-bye.